Samuel 16. And the Lord said to Samuel, "How long will you mourn for Saul, though I have rejected him, so that he would not reign over Israel? Fill your horn with oil and approach, so that I may send you to Jesse of Bethlehem. For I have provided a king from among his sons for myself." And Samuel said, "How shall I go? For Saul will hear of it, and he will put me to death." And the Lord said, "You shall take, by your hand, a calf from the herd. And you shall say, I have arrived in order to immolate to the Lord. And you shall call Jesse to the sacrifice, and I will reveal to you what you should do. And you shall anoint whomever I will indicate to you." Therefore, Samuel did just as the Lord told him. And he went to Bethlehem, and the elders of the city wondered. And meeting him, they said, "Is your arrival peaceful?" And he said, "It is peaceful. I have arrived in order to immolate to the Lord. Be sanctified, and come with me to the sacrifice." Then he sanctified Jesse and his sons, and he called them to the sacrifice. And when they had entered, he saw Eliab, and he said, "Could he be the Christ in the sight of the Lord?" And the Lord said to Samuel, "You should not look with favor on his face, nor on the height of his stature. For I have rejected him. Neither do I judge by the appearance of a man. For man sees those things that are apparent, but the Lord beholds the heart." And Jesse called Abinadab, and he brought him before Samuel. And he said, "Neither has the Lord chosen this one." Then Jesse brought Shammah. And he said about him, "And the Lord has not chosen this one." And so Jesse brought his 7 sons before Samuel. And Samuel said to Jesse, "The Lord has not chosen any of these." And Samuel said to Jesse, "Could the sons now be completed?" But he responded, "There still remains a little one, and he pastures the sheep." And Samuel said to Jesse, "Send and bring him. For we shall not recline to eat, until he arrives here." Therefore, he sent and brought him. Now he was ruddy, and beautiful to behold, and with a stately face. And the Lord said, "Rise up, anoint him. For it is he." Therefore, Samuel took the horn of oil, and he anointed him in the midst of his brothers. And the Spirit of the Lord was guiding David from that day and thereafter. And Samuel rose up, and he went away to Ramah. But the Spirit of the Lord withdrew from Saul, and a wicked spirit from the Lord disturbed him. And the servants of Saul said to him, "Behold, an evil spirit from God disturbs you. May our Lord order, and your servants, who are before you, will seek a man skillful in playing a stringed instrument, so that when the evil spirit from the Lord assails you, he may play with his hand, and you may bear it more easily." And Saul said to his servants, "Then provide for me someone who can play well, and bring him to me." And one of the servants, responding, said, "Behold, I have seen the son of Jesse of Bethlehem, a skillful player, and very strong and robust, a man fit for war, and prudent in words, a handsome man. And the Lord is with him." Therefore, Saul sent messengers to Jesse, saying, "Send to me your son David, who is in the pastures." And so, Jesse took a donkey laden with bread, and a bottle of wine, and a kid from one of the goats, and he sent them, by the hand of his son David, to Saul. And David went to Saul, and stood before him. And he loved him exceedingly, and he made him his armor-bearer. And Saul sent to Jesse, saying, "Let David remain before my sight. For he has found favor in my eyes." And so, whenever the evil spirit from the Lord assailed Saul, David took up his stringed instrument, and he struck it with his hand, and Saul was refreshed and uplifted. For the evil spirit withdrew from him. Samuel 17. Now the Philistines, gathering their troops for battle, assembled at Socoh of Judah. And they made camp between Socoh and Azekah, within the borders of Damim. But Saul and the sons of Israel, having gathered together, went to the valley of Terebinth. And they positioned the army so as to fight against the Philistines. And the Philistines were standing on a mountain on the one side, and Israel was standing on a mountain on the other side. And there was a valley between them. And there went out from the camp of the Philistines a man of illegitimate birth, named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a palm. And he had a helmet of brass upon his head, and he was clothed with a breastplate of scales. Moreover, the weight of his breastplate was 5,000 shekels of brass. And he had plates of brass on his lower legs, and a small shield of brass was covering his shoulders. Now the shaft of his spear was like the beam used by a weaver. And the iron of his spear held 600 shekels of iron. And his armor-bearer went before him. And standing still, he cried out to the battle lines of Israel, and he said to them, "Why have you arrived, prepared for battle? Am I not a Philistine, and are you not the servants of Saul? Choose one man from among you, and let him descend to do battle alone. If he is able to fight with me and to strike me down, we will be your servants. But if I will prevail over him, and strike him down, you will be the servants, and you will serve us." And the Philistine was saying, "I have reproached the troops of Israel today. Present a man to me, and let him undertake a fight against me alone." And Saul and all the Israelites, hearing these words of the Philistine in this manner, were stupefied and exceedingly afraid. Now David was the son of an Ephrathite man, the one mentioned above, from Bethlehem of Judah, whose name was Jesse. He had 8 sons, and during the days of Saul, he was an elderly man, and of great age among men. Now his 3 eldest sons followed Saul into battle. And the names of his 3 sons, who went to the battle, were Eliab, the firstborn, and the second, Abinadab, and the third Shammah. But David was the youngest. Therefore, when the 3 eldest had followed Saul, David went away from Saul, and he returned, so that he might pasture the flock of his father at Bethlehem. Truly, the Philistine advanced morning and evening, and he stood forth for 40 days. Now Jesse said to his son David, "Take, for your brothers, an ephah of cooked grain, and these 10 loaves, and hurry to the camp, to your brothers. And you shall carry these 10 little cheeses to the tribune. And visit your brothers, to see if they are doing well. And learn with whom they have been stationed." But they were in the valley of Terebinth, with Saul and all the sons of Israel, fighting against the Philistines. And so, David rose up in the morning, and he commended the flock to the caretaker. And he went away burdened, just as Jesse had instructed him. And he went to the place of the battle line, and to the army, which, in going out to fight, was shouting in the conflict. For Israel had positioned their troops, but the Philistines also had prepared themselves against them. Then, leaving the items that he had brought under the hand of the keeper of baggage, David ran to the place of the conflict. And he was asking if all was going well with his brothers. And while he was still speaking with them, there appeared a man of spurious descent, whose name was Goliath, the Philistine of Gath, ascending from the camp of the Philistines. And he was speaking in these same words, which David heard. Then all the Israelites, when they had seen the man, fled from his face, fearing him greatly. And someone of Israel said, "Have you seen this man, who has risen up? For he ascended in order to reproach Israel. Therefore, the man who will strike him down, the king will enrich with great wealth, and will give to him his daughter, and will cause his father's house to be free of tribute in Israel." And David spoke to the men who were standing with him, saying, "What will be given to the man who will have struck down this Philistine, and who will have taken away the disgrace from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine, that he should reproach the soldiers of the living God?" Then the people repeated to him the same words, saying, "These things shall be given to the man who will have struck him down." Now when Eliab, his eldest brother, had heard this, as he was speaking with the others, he became angry against David, and he said, "Why did you come here? And why did you leave behind those few sheep in the wilderness? I know your pride and the wickedness of your heart, that you have come down so that you might see the battle. And David said, "What have I done? Is there any word against me?" And he turned away from him a little, toward another. And he asked the same question. And the people responded to him as before. Now the words that David had spoken were heard and reported in the sight of Saul. When he had been led to Saul, he said to him, "Let no one lose heart over him. I, your servant, shall go and fight against the Philistine." And Saul said to David, "You are not able to withstand this Philistine, nor to fight against him. For you are a boy, but he has been a warrior from his boyhood." And David said to Saul, "Your servant was pasturing the flock of his father. And there approached a lion or a bear, and it took a ram from the midst of the flock. And I pursued after them, and I struck them, and I rescued from their mouth. And they rose up against me. And I caught them by the throat, and I strangled and killed them. For I, your servant, have killed both lion and bear. And so this uncircumcised Philistine, too, will be like one of them. Now I will go and take away the reproach of the people. For who is this uncircumcised Philistine, who has dared to curse the army of the living God?" And David said, "The Lord who rescued me from the hand of the lion, and from the hand of the bear, he himself will free me from the hand of this Philistine." Then Saul said to David, "Go, and may the Lord be with you." And Saul clothed David with his garments. And he placed a helmet of brass upon his head, and he clothed him with a breastplate. Then David, having girded his sword over his armor, began to see if he could walk in the armor. But he was not accustomed to it. And David said to Saul, "I cannot move about in this way, for I am not used to it." And he put them aside. And he took up his staff, which he held always in his hands. And he chose for himself 5 very smooth stones from the torrent. And he put them into the shepherd's bag that he had with him. And he took up a sling in his hand. And he went out against the Philistine. And the Philistine, advancing, went and drew near against David. And his armor-bearer was before him. And when the Philistine had seen and considered David, he despised him. For he was a youth, ruddy and of handsome appearance. And the Philistine said to David, "Am I a dog, that you approach against me with a staff?" And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. And he said to David, "Come to me, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the air, and to the beasts of the earth." But David said to the Philistine, "You approach me with sword, and spear, and shield. But I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, which you have reproached. Today, the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you down. And I will take your head from you. And today, I will give the carcasses of the camp of the Philistines to the birds of the air, and to the beasts of the earth, so that all the earth may know that God is with Israel. And this entire assembly will know that the Lord does not save by sword, nor by spear. For this is his war, and he will deliver you into our hands." Then, when the Philistine had risen up, and was approaching, and was drawing near against David, David hurried and ran to the fight against the Philistine. And he put his hand into his bag, and took out 1 stone. And swinging it around, he cast it with the sling and struck the Philistine on the forehead. And the stone became embedded in his forehead. And he fell on his face, upon the ground. And David prevailed against the Philistine with a sling and a stone. And he struck and killed the Philistine. But since David held no sword in his hand, he ran and stood over the Philistine, and he took his sword, and withdrew it from the sheath. And he killed him and cut off his head. Then the Philistines, seeing that their strongest man was dead, fled away. And the men of Israel and Judah, rising up, shouted and pursued after the Philistines, even until they arrived at the valley and as far as the gates of Ekron. And many wounded among the Philistines fell on the way of Shaaraim, and as far as Gath, and as far as Ekron. And the sons of Israel, returning after they had pursued the Philistines, invaded their camp. Then David, taking up the head of the Philistine, brought it to Jerusalem. Yet truly, he placed his armor in his own tent. Now at the time that Saul had seen David going out against the Philistines, he said to Abner, the leader of the military, "From what stock is this youth descended, Abner?" And Abner said, "As your soul lives, O king, I do not know." And the king said, "You shall inquire as to whose son this boy may be." And when David had returned, after the Philistine had been struck down, Abner took him, and brought him before Saul, having the head of the Philistine in his hand. And Saul said to him, "Young man, from what ancestry are you?" And David said, "I am the son of your servant Jesse of Bethlehem." Learn more about Cat. Samuel 18. And it happened that, when he had completed speaking to Saul, the soul of Jonathan adhered to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him like his own soul. And Saul took him that day, and would not permit him to return to his father's house. Then David and Jonathan formed a pact, for he loved him like his own soul. And Jonathan took off the coat that he was wearing, and he gave it to David, with the rest of his garments, even to his sword and bow, and even his belt. Also, David went out to do everything whatsoever that Saul sent him to do, and he conducted himself prudently. And Saul set him over men of war. And he was acceptable in the eyes of the entire people, and most of all in the sight of the servants of Saul. Now when David returned, after he had struck down the Philistine, the women went out, from all the cities of Israel, leading the singing and dancing, rejoicing with timbrels and bells, so as to meet King Saul. And the women sang, as they played, saying, "Saul has struck down 1,000, and David 10,000. Then Saul became exceedingly angry, and this word was displeasing in his eyes. And he said, "They have given David 10,000, and to me they gave only 1,000. What is left for him, except the kingdom itself?" Therefore, Saul did not regard David with a good eye, from that day and thereafter. Then, on the next day, the evil spirit from God assailed Saul, and he prophesied in the midst of his house. And David played with his hand, just as at every other time. And Saul held a lance in his hand. And he threw it, thinking that he would be able to fix David to the wall. And David stepped aside twice, from before his face. And Saul feared David, because the Lord was with him, but he had withdrawn from Saul. Therefore, Saul sent him away from himself, and he made him tribune over 1,000 men. And he entered and departed in the sight of the people. Also, David acted prudently in all his ways, and the Lord was with him. And so, Saul saw that he was exceedingly prudent, and he began to be wary of him. But all of Israel and Judah loved David, for he entered and departed before them. And Saul said to David, "Behold, my elder daughter, Merab. I will give her to you as wife. Only be a valiant man, and fight the wars of the Lord." Now Saul was considering within himself, saying, "Let not my hand be upon him, but let the hands of the Philistines be upon him." Then David said to Saul, "Who am I, and what is my life, and what is my father's kinship within Israel, that I should be the son-in-law of the king?" Then it happened that, at the time when Merab, the daughter of Saul, was to be given to David, she was given to Adriel, the Maholathite, as wife. Now Michal, the other daughter of Saul, loved David. And this was reported to Saul, and it pleased him. And Saul said, "I will give her to him, so that she may be a stumbling block to him, and so that the hand of the Philistines may be upon him." And Saul said to David, "In 2 things, you shall be my son-in-law today." And Saul commanded his servants to speak to David privately, saying, "Behold, you are pleasing to the king, and all his servants love you. Now therefore, be the son-in-law of the king." And the servants of Saul spoke all these words to the ears of David. And David said, "Does it seem a small matter to you, to be the son-in-law of the king? I am but a poor and unimportant man." And the servants reported to Saul, saying, "David has spoken words in this manner." Then Saul said, "Speak in this way to David, the king does not have need of any dowry, but only 100 foreskins from the Philistine men, so that he may be vindicated from the enemies of the king." So did Saul think to deliver David into the hands of the Philistines. And when the servants had repeated to David the words that Saul had spoken, the word was pleasing in the eyes of David, so that he would become son-in-law of the king. And after a few days, David, rising up, went with the men who were under him, and he struck down 200 men of the Philistines. And he brought their foreskins, and he counted them out for the king, so that he might be his son-in-law. And so, Saul gave to him his daughter Michal as wife. And Saul saw and understood that the Lord was with David. And Michal, the daughter of Saul, loved him. And Saul began to fear David all the more. And Saul became the enemy of David, every day. And the leaders of the Philistines departed. And from the beginning of their departure, David conducted himself more prudently than all the servants of Saul, and his name became exceedingly celebrated. Samuel 19. Now Saul spoke to his son Jonathan, and to all his servants, so that they would kill David. But Jonathan, the son of Saul, loved David very much. And Jonathan revealed it to David, saying, "Saul, my father, is seeking to kill you. Because of this, I ask you, take care for yourself in the morning. And you should conceal yourself and remain in hiding. Then I, going out, will be standing beside my father in the field, where you will be. And I will speak about you to my father. And whatever I see, I will report to you." Then Jonathan spoke good things about David to his father Saul. And he said to him, "You should not sin, O king, against your servant David. For he has not sinned against you, and his works toward you are very good." And he took his life in his own hand, and struck down the Philistine. And the Lord wrought a great salvation for all of Israel. You saw it, and you rejoiced. Why then would you sin against innocent blood by killing David, who is without guilt? And when Saul had heard this, being pleased by the voice of Jonathan, he swore, "As the Lord lives, he shall not be killed." And so Jonathan called David, and he revealed to him all of these words. And Jonathan led in David to Saul, and he was before him, just as he had been yesterday and the day before. Then the war was stirred up again. And David went out and fought against the Philistines. And he struck them down with a great slaughter. And they fled from his face. And the evil spirit from the Lord came to Saul, who was sitting in his house and holding a lance. And David was playing music with his hand. And Saul attempted to fix David to the wall with the lance. But David turned aside from the face of Saul. And the lance failed to wound him, and it became fixed in the wall. And David fled, and so he was saved that night. Therefore, Saul sent his guards to David's house, so that they might watch for him, and so that he might be killed in the morning. And after Michal, his wife, had reported this to David, saying, "Unless you save yourself this night, tomorrow you will die," she lowered him down through a window. Then he fled and went away, and he was saved. Then Michal took a statue, and placed it on the bed. And she placed the pelt of a goat for the hair at its head. And she covered it with clothes. And Saul sent attendants to seize David. And it was answered that he was sick. And again, Saul sent messengers to see David, saying, "Bring him to me on the bed, so that he may be killed." And when the messengers had arrived, they found a likeness on the bed, with a goat pelt at its head. And Saul said to Michal, "Why have you deceived me in this way, and released my enemy, so that he may flee?" And Michal responded to Saul, "Because he said to me, 'Release me, otherwise I will kill you.'" Now David was saved by fleeing, and he went to Samuel in Ramah. And he reported to him all that Saul had done to him. And he and Samuel went away and stayed at Naioth. Then it was reported to Saul by some, saying, "Behold, David is at Naioth, in Ramah." Therefore, Saul sent officers to seize David. And when they had seen a company of prophets prophesying, with Samuel presiding over them, the Spirit of the Lord also came to them, and they also began to prophesy. And when this was reported to Saul, he sent other messengers. But they also prophesied. And again, Saul sent messengers a third time. And they also prophesied. And Saul, being exceedingly angry, also went to Ramah himself. And he went as far as the great cistern, which is in Sakah. And he inquired and said, In which place are Samuel and David? And it was told to him, Behold, they are at Naioth, in Ramah. And he went to Naioth, in Ramah, and the Spirit of the Lord came to him also. And he continued on, walking and prophesying, until he arrived at Naioth, in Ramah. And he also took off his garments, and he prophesied with the others before Samuel. And he fell down naked, throughout that day and night. From this, too, is derived the proverb, Could Saul also be among the prophets? Samuel 20. Then David fled from Naioth, which is in Ramah, and he went and said before Jonathan, What have I done? What is my iniquity, or what is my sin, against your father, so that he would seek my life? And he said to him, May this not be. You shall not die. For my father will not do anything, great or small, without first revealing it to me. Therefore, has my father concealed this word solely from me? By no means shall this be. And he swore again to David. And David said, Your father certainly knows that I have found favor in your sight, and so he will say, Let Jonathan not know this, lest he be saddened. So truly, as the Lord lives, and as your soul lives, there is only one step separating me from death. And Jonathan said to David, Whatever your soul will tell me, I will do for you. Then David said to Jonathan, Behold, tomorrow is the new moon, and I am accustomed to sit in a seat beside the king to eat. Therefore, permit me that I may be hidden in the field, until the evening of the third day. If your father, looking around, will seek me, you shall respond to him, David asked me if he may hurry to Bethlehem, his own city. For there are solemn sacrifices in that place for all of his tribe together. If he will say, It is well, then your servant will have peace. But if he will be angry, know that his malice has reached its height. Therefore, show mercy to your servant. For you have brought me, your servant, into a covenant of the Lord with you. But if there is any iniquity in me, you may kill me, and you shall not lead me into your father. And Jonathan said, May this be far from you. For certainly, if I ever realized that any wickedness was determined by my father against you, I would not be able to do anything other than report it to you. And David responded to Jonathan, Who will repeat it to me, if your father may perhaps answer you harshly about me? And Jonathan said to David, Come, and let us go out into the field. And when they both had gone out into the field, Jonathan said before David, O Lord, God of Israel, if I will discover a decision by my father, tomorrow, or the day after, and if there will be anything good concerning David, and yet I do not immediately send to you and make it known to you. May the Lord do these things to Jonathan, and may he add these other things. But if my father will have persevered in malice against you, I will reveal it to your ear, and I will send you away, so that you may go in peace, and so that the Lord may be with you, just as he was with my father. And if I live, you shall show the mercy of the Lord to me. Yet truly, if I die, you shall not take away your mercy from my house, even forever, when the Lord will have rooted out the enemies of David, each and every one of them, from the earth. May he take Jonathan from his house, and may the Lord require it from the hands of the enemies of David. Therefore, Jonathan formed a covenant with the house of David. And the Lord required it from the hands of the enemies of David. And Jonathan continued to swear to David, because he loved him. For he loved him like his own soul. And Jonathan said to him, Tomorrow is the new moon, and you will be sought. For your seat will be empty until the day after tomorrow. Therefore, you shall descend quickly, and you shall go to the place where you are to be hidden, on a day when it is lawful to work, and you shall remain beside the stone that is called Ezel. And I will shoot 3 arrows near it, and I will cast them as if I were practicing for myself toward a mark. Also, I will send a boy, saying to him, Go and bring the arrows to me. If I will say to the boy, Behold, the arrows are before you, take them up, you shall approach before me, because there is peace for you, and there is nothing evil, as the Lord lives. But if I will have spoken to the boy in this way, Behold, the arrows are away from you, then you shall go away in peace, for the Lord has released you. Now about the word that you and I have spoken, may the Lord be between you and me, even forever. Therefore, David was hidden in the field. And the new moon came, and the king sat down to eat bread. And when the king had sat down on his chair, which was beside the wall, Jonathan rose up, and Abner sat beside Saul, and David's place appeared empty. And Saul did not say anything on that day, for he was thinking that perhaps something happened to him, so that he was not clean, or not purified. And when the second day after the new moon had begun to dawn, David's place again appeared empty. And Saul said to Jonathan, his son, Why has the son of Jesse not arrived to eat, neither yesterday, nor today? And Jonathan responded to Saul, He petitioned me earnestly that he might go to Bethlehem. And he said, Permit me. For there is a solemn sacrifice in the city. One of my brothers has summoned me. Now therefore, if I have found favor in your eyes, I will go quickly, and I will see my brothers. For this reason, he has not come to the table of the king. Then Saul, becoming angry against Jonathan, said to him, You son of a woman wantonly seizing a man. Could I be ignorant that you love the son of Jesse, to your own shame, and to the shame of your disgraceful mother? For all the days that the son of Jesse moves upon earth, neither you, nor your kingdom, will be secure. And so, send and bring him to me, here and now. For he is a son of death. Then Jonathan, answering his father Saul, said, Why should he die? What has he done? And Saul picked up a lance, so that he might strike him. And Jonathan understood that it had been decided by his father that David be put to death. Therefore, Jonathan rose up from the table in a rage of anger. And he did not eat bread on the second day after the new moon. For he was saddened over David, because his father had confounded him. And when the morning had begun to dawn, Jonathan went into the field according to the agreement with David, and a young boy was with him. And he said to his boy, Go, and bring to me the arrows that I shoot. And when the boy had run, he shot another arrow away from the boy. And so, the boy went to the place of the arrow which Jonathan had shot. And Jonathan cried out, from behind the back of boy, and said, Behold, the arrow is there, farther away from you. And Jonathan cried out again, from behind the back of the boy, saying, Go quickly. Do not stand still. Then Jonathan's boy collected the arrows, and he brought them to his lord. And he did not understand at all what was happening. For only Jonathan and David knew the matter. Then Jonathan gave his weapons to the boy, and he said to him, Go, and carry them into the city. And when the boy had gone away, David rose up from his place, which turned toward the south, and falling prone on the ground, he reverenced 3 times. And kissing one another, they wept together, but David more so. Then Jonathan said to David, Go in peace. And let us both keep all that we have ever sworn in the name of the Lord, saying, May the Lord be between me and you, and between my offspring and your offspring, even forever. And David rose up and went away. But Jonathan entered into the city. Thank you for watching. If you like the content on this channel, please press subscribe, the like button or comment below. We'd love to get your tips. See you next time.